I'm here with Dr. McDaniel. This is our second time having a discussion. This discussion will be more sales focused. Thank you so much for joining. How are you doing, Dr. McDaniel?
Hey, doing well. Yourself?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you for asking. It's a great pleasure to have you on. The first video we did is actually my most viewed video.
It's all my raving fans out there.
It's my most viewed video outside of short form content. Short form content is its own thing. It's just way easier to get views. Yeah. But it's by far my most viewed video. In this episode, I'll be asking you questions related to sales. I know that you have a very impressive and extensive background in sales. So I'm really curious to hear your insights on sales. If you can just give us a brief background about your sales background specifically. As I said, I've had you on the show and we know a bit about your educational background and just sort of your general background. But if maybe you can give us just a brief introduction on your background in sales, that'd be awesome.
Oh, brief. Okay. Well, first time I ever sold anything, I was 10 years old and too young to get a job, but I still needed money. So I went and bought in the summertime. I went and bought after Christmas, a bunch of discount Christmas wrap and cards. Because it was all like, 20, 50% off, 70% off, 5% off. So I stashed all that. And then when the summertime rolled around, I went and sold it to my neighbors, for a discount still, but more than what I paid for it. And made a ton of money just like selling Christmas wrap in summertime to neighbors. And what I realized is that there are, there's a lot about sales that you can learn, but a lot of it is just innate. Some people just have a gift for it, a knack. And I found out I had it, which is great. Didn't really, besides, selling knives in college and things like that, but didn't really start into professional sales until after my MBA. And so I was in IT solution sales for about 5-6 years. And then I went over to mechanical engineering sales and sold performance contracting and mechanical engineering related projects, mostly to hospitals, schools, places like that. And so that's where I spent most of my time in sales.
We'll, get a lot of your insights here in these coming questions. You clearly had an inclination for sales early. I've seen your background. I've seen your resume on LinkedIn, a very impressive sales background. So what interested you in getting into sales? You talked about it is innate, having that sales skill and having that skill set, being adept at sales. I would agree that there's absolutely some very important innate elements, but what was it that sort of compelled you to get into that function?
I hate to say this because it makes me sound lazy, but for me it was just incredibly easy. Right? And so you've heard the whole thing, like a duck on water, or a fish swimming, but you don't try to get the fish to run and you don't try to get the duck, to go underwater. That it makes sense to do the things that you're naturally good at. It's just going to be a lot easier for you. And so for me, that was the case. I got thrown into my first sales position kind of by accident, just did really well at it. And so continued, down that road. So I like that part of it. I also like the kind of purpose-driven feeling that you get when you're actually helping people solve a problem. I sold a lot of projects to rural hospitals that were crumbling because they were built in like World War II era. And they were crumbling and it was terrible. And my team would come in and we would get them all fixed up, shiny, looking nice, and everything functioning like it's supposed to. And you would leave that community knowing that community now has a decent hospital they can go to. There's a lot of, value in that to me personally, that I did something significant that, made the world a better place. So.
Yeah, I think that's got to be the perspective when you're doing sales. It's not, I want to sell this so I can make commission and make money. Right. You have to come from that perspective. And that's the most effective, obviously the most ethical, but it's also just the most effective.
And you hit the nail on the head right there because customers can smell that on people. Yeah. When they get the sense that you're commission driven and not really about them, they can smell it on you and it kills the entire relationship.
It sure will. And now you're sort of that, that slimy salesperson.
Yeah.
Have this natural inclination to be like, I'm good.
Right.
How long were you in sales, like corporate sales, or just doing sales full time post college? And what were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in sales?
So after the MBA until probably about 2017 when I started the PhD studies. So a good, 17 years. Biggest challenge, I would say, is the changing landscape of sales. So I think I talked to you last time about how sales used to be, here's my product, who can I find to sell it to? Then it turned into meet the customer and try to figure out what they need, the whole, what keeps you up at night conversation, right? But then it eventually shifted from that to customers are not going to waste their time talking to you unless you're coming at them with a solution at the first meeting. So it can't be, discovery, they call it the discovery process. It really can't be a lot of time in discovery. Tell me your needs, what keeps you up at night and all that. It's more the successful salespeople in today's market are the ones who come and say, I've already thought through all the threats facing your business and I have a solution, right? Now we'll tailor it depending on your exact situation. But if this isn't keeping you up at night, it should be.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what that threat is. People will pay you money for that meeting.
Yeah. So getting to the point there, like understanding their needs and their pain points and, not exactly circumventing all the small talk, but getting to that quickly enough. So that way you don't lose them. You have their attention and are able to maintain it.
Yeah, much like an entrepreneur's elevator pitch, the truly important people don't have time to just talk to you, to just chat. Small talk and all that. That's great for building a relationship, and you need relationship to be a successful salesperson, or else they're not going to trust you.
Yeah.
But you can't have the first meeting and it's just chat, right? They're going to want something of value from meeting number one.
Yeah, my next question was going to be, and it's sort of, similar to the first question. I think you may have answered it, and please correct me if you want to expand upon anything else. But like, what are some mistakes, that either you've even made in your beginning sales career? Obviously, you were clearly very adept at sales, but we've all made mistakes, or mistakes that you've seen your colleagues make, but it might be just what you just said. And I don't want to, take words out of your mouth, but that they're not getting to those pain points fast enough.
Well, it's that, but it's also, you have to trust your team. Absolutely. Whether it's a sport or whatever, you got to trust your team or else you're on the wrong team. But there is such a thing as putting too much trust in your team, right? It's the whole trust but verify kind of thing. And so this nearly bit me in the rear end in a bad way. So we were out at this very rural, far, far away from anywhere kind of hospital. And my team of engineers had been telling me, yeah, it's a $4 million project. It's a $4 million project. We've done the math. It's going to be a $4 million project. So I kept prepping the board, prepping the CEO. Hey, we're looking at about $4 million. We're continuing the development process, but it's going to be right about here because I trusted my team, right? Well, then they went out for actual bids to subs. And because it was so far away, everybody put premium pricing on their bids. So by the time we go to the board meeting, the engineers come to me and they're like, actually, it's going to be more like 6 million. After I just spent the last 3 months prepping them for a $4 million price tag.
Ah, man.
Right? So fortunately, because we had the relationship and they trusted me, I went to the board and I did the presentation and I said, look, we put out for bid. Everybody put premium pricing because you're way out here in the middle of nowhere. So my $4 million project is going to be more like 6. And they signed the contract anyway.
Wow.
So, I mean, it ended well, but it's something that I learned is that, I need to be thinking through these things, not just trusting the team to think through these things.
Because that could have not ended well. And
easily.
that could have easily led to like the demise of that particular deal.
That's
of
right.
them saying, $2 million more. That's not what we agreed upon. That's not, these last few months of discussion. That was not, because right. That's not marginally more,
that's 50% more. Yeah.
That is materially more.
That's right.
But that's great that it ended well. And to not trust your team, but at the same time to, of course, have some level of trust. So you build those relationships, but I see what you're saying to also do your own homework. So what kind of mindset do you think someone needs to have, Dr. McDaniel, to be successful in sales? Like, how important are qualities like thick skin and persistence in sales?
Well, it's beyond necessary. It's, without those things, you will just absolutely fail. It's, kind of trite old wisdom, but, they say 9 no's for every yes. Yeah, maybe, depending on the industry, but maybe a 10% chance of getting from no, finally somebody says yes.
And that's right? Pretty good.
That's a good ratio, yeah. And so a lot of it, so there's that, but there's also things like creativity, finding new ways to think through people's problems, new ways to communicate to people the story of the deal. So whenever we would go and we would inspect a facility, the engineers would be looking for all the, what's wrong, what's wrong, what's wrong. But I would be looking for more like the story, So it's like, okay, so you're telling me the boiler is near the end of its life. So what happens if that thing were to just give up the ghost and they've got a hospital full of patients? What happens then? And so then we start thinking down that road of here's what could happen. Here's what that might look like. Basically it would be a disaster financially and blah, blah, blah. So that's the story that I would bring to the customer, not, hey, you've got a bad boiler, but FYI, if that thing gives up the ghost, here's all the things that might happen. And suddenly it's like, that's a very real threat that I need to take care of, right? Not just, another expense. So a lot of creativity is necessary. But you're right about the persistence. I can remember I had seen the mechanical room. I knew how bad this particular facility was. I knew they needed our help. So basically every Tuesday at 9 a.m., I would show up and just sit outside the CEO's office trying to get 10 minutes of her time. Because, wouldn't respond to emails, wouldn't respond to phone calls. I didn't want to be a jerk or a stalker, but I knew they needed my help, right? So on my way to other places, I would stop in, I would sit there, I would hope to catch her as she's coming out the door to the next meeting. Finally, one day I caught her, elevator pitch, probably $15-20 million worth of projects later, they have a great hospital.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to sit there.
I think that this kind of leads into my question about objection, Dr. McDaniel, because navigating objections, inevitable objections, is so incredibly important. And if you're someone who doesn't know how to navigate objections or is not willing to, then good luck even making 10% sales. You probably won't make any. How did you navigate that without sounding too pushy? Like, what was your general strategy as to how you navigated objections?
Yeah, the first thing you have to keep in mind when you're talking about objections is never to let it become an argument or a debate. If you're arguing with your customer, the deal is done. It's over. You don't have a chance, right? So there's all kinds of models out there about how to handle objections, but most of them have the same basic elements. The first thing is you confirm that you heard what the person said correctly, right? So that slows down the whole conversation. Rather than coming right back with, no, that's not true, and here's why. You say, okay, well, let me understand that. I want to make sure that I heard you correctly. What you're saying is X, right? Now, you don't want to do that too many times that they like, did you hear me the first time? Or, what's your problem? Are you hearing impaired? But just to clarify, I think I heard you say this. Is that right? Okay. And then if you're going to keep this from becoming an argument, a yeah, but, you don't want it to be yeah, but, right? You want it to be there's other information that I'm not sure you've considered, right? So I hear that you're saying this, but the thing I want to add to your collection of information is this other fact that I'm not sure you know about. And so once I've introduced this new information, now tell me what you're thinking. That whole kind of a approach, it's like, I hear you, but here's this other information. Now let's discuss, based on the new information, what your opinion is, now. And again, just slowing the whole thing way down so it doesn't become an argument or a debate. Nobody's blood pressure needs to be rising. Everybody's calm.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Because on the sales end, you're sitting there watching your commission go bye-bye, and you're thinking, oh gosh, I've got bills to pay, I've got kids to put through college, whatever. You can't let that pressure start to dictate how you react in that situation.
The moment you come across as too pushy or as overly persuasive or just overly, contrarian or just anything like that, you've lost them. And I think that you made a great point, is to kind of first repeat what they said. And I think, as you said, there's a fine line in that. Like, don't do that every time.
Every sentence, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, clearly that's, then that's going to come across like, is this person even listening to me? Is this person even smart enough?
Right.
For me to, because dealing with objection, Dr. McDaniel, is really one of the most important things in sales, because people are going to almost, they're sort of their natural inclination when you are cold calling them. And I'm going to ask you about cold calling momentarily, is like, no, who is this salesperson? I'm good. So being able to navigate those objections in a way that's delicate, handling that appropriately is just imperative. What was your general approach when cold calling? Like, obviously, your approach is going to be more nuanced and different, of course, depending on who you're talking to and the direction of the conversation. And there's aspects in which it will sort of naturally, change your approach. But what were some general principles or general approaches that you commonly use?
First of all, I personally believe there's no such thing as a cold call. Well, there is. There's a cold call if you want to be a failure. But if you want to be successful at it, there's no such thing as a cold call, because before you talk to anybody, unless you just randomly met them in an elevator, you will have done your research, right? Most of the people I was selling to were public entities. So they had board meeting notes. They had, by the time I went and saw the person for the first time, I already knew how long they'd been in their job, who their key board members were, who the decision makers were, what issues they'd been facing, because it's all public knowledge. It's all, there on record, right? Now, sometimes that's not the case, right? Depending on the industry, it might be a privately held industry that doesn't have any public documents, and you got to get a little more creative. But always, always, always do the research first. Even if it's just a casual, how you doing? Here's my company, right? Still, you should know everything there is to know that's publicly available about that customer before you've even met them.
What you said in the beginning is so true, that there's just innate sort of people skills, like social inclination that some people have that allow them to excel more so than others. But that doesn't discount the fact that the other component of this is being as well researched and being as knowledgeable about the product or service you're selling. And as well researched as you can be about the person you're selling these products or services to. Yeah.
And you don't always, by the way, want the customer to know that you've done all that research, because sometimes it can come off as creepy, kind of stalkerish. Yeah. Hey, I was reading in your board notes from 3 years ago that they were talking about your salary, something like that. It's not, you don't want to disclose everything. To go with that, though, a lot of people will do so much research that they've convinced themselves the customer is going to die without me. So then when they finally do go to meet the customer, they come off as condescending, or even like, look, you're going to die without me, so you better take this meeting kind of situation.
Yeah.
That'll turn a customer off within seconds, right? As soon as they get that feeling.
For sure. That's a really great point. I guess it's twofold in the extent that there's that social component, that innate understanding personalities and how to talk to different personalities, having that social inclination that really, for the most part, some people just have it more than others. Not to say you can't learn it, because you can. But then there's also this side of which you're just knowledgeable and you've done your research and you're coming prepared. Sure, you would agree that both need to be there when doing sales. But what would you say is more important? Like, what's the most important quality to have to be successful in sales?
Yeah, I mean, if we're comparing knowledge versus likability, I think it really depends on the industry that you're in. The more of a commodity that you're selling, the more it is that everybody has it, can do it, whatever, it's not unique, then the more likability becomes kind of the key. But in most of the industries I was in, knowledge was way more important than likability. I'm not always a likable person. I can be grumpy sometimes. If I don't get my caffeine intake, then hey, whatever. But customers would talk to me because they knew that I knew what I was talking about, right? And I'd done this at 10 hospitals before them, and they have references, and all those projects went well. And so it's like, okay, McDaniel's grumpy, but dang, he knows a lot, So find the industry where you can be that. I think you'll have more success than the industry where you're just one of many people who do the exact same thing. They could buy from anybody. Who got me the biggest Christmas present last year gets my business, or whatever, right? You want to avoid those industries as much as possible.
When it came to closing deals, right? Because, closing deals in sales is sort of its own thing, right? Like, I've seen people, Dr. McDaniel, who've kicked it off great. They seem that, they're having small talk with this lead and it just seems to be going great. But somewhere along the way, something went wrong, and who knows what could have been said or what could have transpired, but something led to that deal falling through the cracks. Right. What was your approach to closing deals and ensuring that deals were made?
I think it's a convoluted answer only because it was very different depending on the industry that we're talking about. And then while I was getting my PhD, I was actually a corporate trainer for an in-home sales kind of home remodeling company, right? And so talk about night and day difference. On the one hand, I was doing mechanical engineering project sales with a 9-month sales cycle where you had all that time to make friends and get to know people and find, deeply what the customer needs and how your solution is going to benefit them. On the other hand, with these in-home salespeople, you've got 1 hour in somebody's house to get them to like you, trust you, and buy your stuff. Night and day difference.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
But it's funny because when it came to closing, the people who did well in that particular environment, the in-home sales environment, they all had the same thing in common, and that was the ability to just ask, right? To just ask what's keeping somebody from signing the contract. You don't want to be so cheesy that you're going to be like the car dealer. So what's it going to take to get you in this baby today? Right. But you do have to have the boldness to be able to say, look, we've talked about your problem. I've presented the solution, which I think is a perfect fit. What in the world is stopping you? I mean, let's do this thing, So it's kind of a boldness, right? And a lot of people don't have that boldness, which is why a lot of people don't do sales. It's kind of a unique skill set.
Yep. Or do it, Dr. McDaniel, and don't last.
Don't last. Starve.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Sales has a high turnover rate, and it's for many of the reasons you've noted in this conversation. It's not easy. It's not easy to be compelling and understand, how to deal with different personalities, right? You're always talking to different personalities, and someone who's socially astute and who has that social inclination kind of understands how to navigate different conversations with different people. Maybe they're changing their tonality, or maybe they're changing their attitude, or just whatever it might take to have a conversation that's more conducive to the personality that's in front of them.
Right. Yeah, we have this thing in psychology called the similarity effect. Have you heard of this?
Perhaps I've heard of the concept. I'd love for you to expand on it.
Yeah, no, the basic concept in psychology is that we like people who are like us, similar to us, right? And so the thing that we used to teach the salespeople is emulation, right? And so you try to, don't do it so obviously that they notice, because then they think you're being weird and creepy,
Totally.
right?
Yep.
But just try to be like them in little ways, little indiscernible ways, right? If they're leaning into the conversation, lean into the conversation yourself. If they're talking fast, maybe join them. If they're talking slow, maybe join them. Because people just naturally like folks that are similar to themselves, just psychologically speaking, and they buy from who they like. Sales really is one of those things that is better learned by doing. Entrepreneurship's very similar. You're better learning it by doing it than by reading it in a book, right? So it's very similar to a sport. You can read all the books about golf that you want to, but until you go out there and start to apply it to your swing, it's not going to make any difference.
There's just some fields that you're going to take quantum leaps in your understanding by, practical application.
That's right. And we actually prefer that MBAs have a couple of years at least of work experience before they come back, after college and try to get an advanced degree. There's so much to learn. This, having gone through the program, right? There's so much to learn that you can't just absorb it all from a textbook or whatever. It's too much. And so the only way to survive is to compare it against your own lived experience and then say, have I experienced this or have I not? And then you only have to memorize the outliers. I know this to be true, so I don't need to memorize it. That other thing, I've never seen that happen in real life, so I need to probably memorize whatever model that is. But for the most part, I've seen this happen. I know that's true. I don't need to memorize it, right? So,
Dr. McDaniel, I want to ask you my last question. Really appreciate your time. What advice would you give? Of course, just from this conversation, someone watching has probably will have gathered all kinds of advice, right? But what would be the best advice that you would give to someone looking to get into sales?
I would say pick your industry very carefully. The sales experience from one industry to another can be night and day. Like I said, is it the kind of sales position where you're going into people's houses and in 1 hour trying to convince them to buy something? Or is it developing a relationship over 9 months until you present in front of the board, they all vote yes, and they give you millions of dollars, right? They're two very different experiences. And so every industry is going to be slightly different, especially when it comes to things like compensation. When I first started in mechanical engineering salespeople would keep 10% of the value of the project. Well, it didn't take long for salespeople to realize, hey, if I go after big projects, I could make a big payday. And sure enough, we had a lady on staff who was famous because she sold a $10 million project, and they stroked her a $1 million commission check.
Wow.
And right after that, they changed the rule.
I don't think she was still there after that.
She continued to work, I think, just out of boredom. But yeah. So anyway, so from industry to industry, and even from company to company, it can be totally different in terms of compensation packages and expectations and all of the other things, right? So do all your research beforehand before you agree to join anybody's team.
And I'm sure she was compelled to keep getting some more paychecks after that $1 million payout. She said, I'm going to stay right where I'm at.
Of course.
I'm going to wrap this up soon because I want to be mindful of your time. But this is what we've talked about personally is, sales can be very lucrative. And some people don't realize that that's a function, that sometimes gets paid, or some of the highest paid individuals are the top sellers in a corporate firm.
That's right.
At least predominantly because of that commission potential. They have that base salary, but there's likely other members of staff who have a base salary that could be akin to theirs, but it's that commission potential that puts them over the top.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so just, for everybody looking for jobs in any space, keep in mind there's a kind of a negative correlation between your salary and your commission potential, right? So the higher they're going to pay you in base, the less they're going to promise you in commissions, right? Typically.
Yep. Yeah,
so,
that's true.
In the engineering space, we were paying people 6-figure bases, but the commissions, not as uncapped. They started to put rules about how much you could make and all that kind of thing, right?
Yep.
Where in other industries, they may only give you a 30K base, but unlimited potential and things like that. So it's kind of a balancing act. Whatever you're comfortable with, some people are comfortable with the higher salary, lower commission potential, just because it's it's more secure or whatever like that. Keep in mind too, though, that the higher your salary, the more you're on the chopping block every quarter.
Yeah.
So the higher your salary is, the more your name's probably on somebody's whiteboard about why are we paying all this money?
Yeah. That's why some people who get really good at sales, Dr. McDaniel, say, you know what, keep the base salary. I just want commissions because they know that. And of course, it's risky and it gets into a nuanced conversation about what you just noted about what someone might be comfortable with and financial stability. But people who are hyper confident in their skills say, you know what, hold the base. I'll take purely commission, right? Because then they're able to scale it.
Right.
Dr. McDaniel, it was a great conversation. Really, a great pleasure having you on again. I really appreciate your time.
You bet.
It was great. Really great insights about sales. And thank you so much for your time. I hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, absolutely. See you soon.
All right. I'll see you soon. Thank you, Dr. McDaniel.